If you look up who the least played killers are in Dead by Daylight, it's the twins in at number 1, the hag at number 2, and hackers playing Dwight as a killer at number 3. That said, twins mains really love their playstyle. It's undeniably very unique and innovative, but the twins have a very low kill rate, so it makes sense why she's picked so rarely. However, when it comes to hag, she has one of the highest kill rates in the entire game, so why is her pick rate so bad? In my opinion, this is because she has inherently the worst, most outdated, and power crept design of any killer in DBD. There are so many fundamental problems laced into her kit that it is basically impossible to fix her without a proper rework of her abilities and add-ons. So in this video, we're going to be discussing why she is so awful to not only play against, but to play as well. In addition, I'll be creating a total hag rework that stays true to the original concept of the character, but addresses all of the outdated elements of her current design. Now, for all of the hag mains out there, I apologize in advance. I'm sure you are completely normal, functional members of society, and I don't mean to trigger you. I really hope by the end of this video, this rework makes you excited and you're on board with the changes. To start, let's talk about the most glaring issues with hag's design. She is basically limited to only existing on a certain portion of a map, and there's a few reasons for that. She's incredibly slow, so she pretty much has to rely on her traps to get hits. She essentially has zero chase power or potential, and because she's so slow, it takes her way too long to move around the map and place traps everywhere. Add that to the fact that in her base kit, her effective teleport range is extremely short, so even if a distant trap is triggered, she literally can't teleport to it. This is why hag is possibly the most immobile killer in the game, depending on how you look at it. Obviously, this creates awful gameplay, most notable being 3-gen strategies and camping. You may have heard content creators use the term hag's web or minefield in the past because this is a very accurate way to look at her power. Good hag players like to create a condensed cluster of traps that effectively lock down a portion of a map. Inside hag's web, or more specifically her area of control, she's very oppressive, and the deeper into the web a survivor is, the more difficult it is for them to escape or for their teammates to help them escape. In an ideal hag match, she has 3 gens and a hooked survivor surrounded by a minefield of her traps. This is pretty much the definitive high-level hag playstyle. Indoor maps work best for her because there's a lot of narrow pathways and it's much easier to predict survivor movement. That said, for the majority of players on both sides, not all, this gameplay is boring, stale, and let's be honest, not very rewarding. Add to that the counter to hag is basically to bully her. Survivors need to constantly trigger her minefield when it's most inconvenient for her, trigger traps out of the range of her teleport hit, and win the war of attrition on gens. So although I think it's cool that defeating hag requires teamwork, it's undeniable that a hag match is largely based around very frustrating gameplay. Who it's frustrating for is dependent on who's losing the match and who's winning, and I strongly disagree with the notion that this is somehow necessary. Every killer should be as fun as possible for both sides. So in order to fix hag, we need to address her base kit issues, starting with simple changes. Starting with the simple changes, she would no longer have any range limit on how far she could teleport to a trap. This would eliminate her restrictions and allow her to play on an entire map no matter what size it is. Her base trap setting speed would be increased by 25%, and her base movement speed would be increased from 110% up to 115%, which is the normal speed that most killers move at in DBD. However, her normal teleport traps that she has now would be removed and replaced with signs. She also would no longer be able to place these signs within 20 meters of a hooked survivor, similar to other modern killers like Dredge and the Artist. This would significantly reduce her reliance on camping and tunneling. To make up for this, hag would now have 3 different base kit sign types that she could swap between by tapping the power button. These new signs would allow her to set up really high level combos and control the map in a way that would require much more strategy. She would also still have a total currency pool of 10 traps that she could place at one time. Her most common trap type would be the Wicca sign. This would work very similar to Hag's current teleport trap, but with key differences. Now when a survivor activates the trap, the Hag gets a notification, but she cannot just macro the teleport button to immediately teleport. Sort of like with the Mint Rag add-on, she will now need to manually look to the trap to teleport to it. However, once she teleports to the trap, she'll move at 172% movement speed for 2 seconds, which for reference is nearly identical to Sadako's movement speed boost coming out of a TV with the Broken Fingernails add-on. This would give the survivor a short window to try and counter the teleport, while also keeping the risk factor for survivors who activate her traps out of range on purpose to waste her time. Her second sign would be the Ink sign, which would act somewhat similar to a bear trap from the Trapper. When a survivor steps on one of these traps, a muddy hand would come out of the ground and hold the survivor's leg in place. Just like a bear trap, they can try to free themselves or have a teammate rescue them. Unlike a bear trap though, this trap would not injure the survivor immediately, and survivors could not be grabbed from full health if the Hag hits them while they're grabbed by a muddy hand. Her third base kit sign would be the Pentacle. This sign cannot be triggered by survivors and allows Hag to freely teleport to it at any time. Once she teleports to it, the sign is destroyed and she must replace it in order to teleport to it again. Her ability to teleport to Pentacle signs would be on a 15-second cooldown, so she couldn't just fly between 3 gens over and over again. This sign would also come with no movement speed buff whatsoever. With these base kit reworks, Hag becomes much more of an engaging killer to play as and against. She is no longer limited to a small portion of the map and is a legitimate threat in a chase. However, her true power still comes from her signs. The player's ability to pre-plan and use their game knowledge would be very rewarded. Likewise, survivors will largely be able to avoid the very stale gameplay that the original Hag used to encourage. Now with all of that said, Hag would need a complete add-on overhaul as well, and the potential for unique add-ons would be pretty much limitless with this killer. Real quick before we get into the add-on rework, I want to say that a lot of her add-ons will swap out signs with different abilities. So for instance, if she has a green and red add-on that replaces her Pentacle sign with a different ability, the red add-on will supersede the green add-on. Basically, the abilities from both add-ons will not stack, and the more rare add-on will always win, so there's no reason to use them together. However, if you use an add-on that changes the Pentacle sign with the Wicca sign, they will work together, allowing you to create a lot of different combos. When it comes to add-on design approach, Michael Myers is the best example in my opinion. His add-ons completely modify his abilities, and the survivors need to figure out which add-ons he's using as quickly as possible so they can adapt and survive. It's a really fun dynamic that I love, so that's the approach I'm using with redesigning Hag's add-ons. I totally understand that some of them might be a bit too ambitious, but I don't care. We're having fun, alright? Let's get into it, starting with her brown add-ons. Rope Necklet increases the amount of signs the Hag can place by 2. Powdered Eggshell. Survivors who activate a Wicca sign are inflicted with the exhausted status effect for 20 seconds. For a brown add-on, I think this is super strong, and it'll allow the Hag to deal with a lot of the exhaustion perks that survivors like to use to counter her traps. Dead Fly Mud. Survivors hit while grabbed by a muddy hand are broken for 60 seconds. I think this add-on will really lead its way into a hit and run sort of playstyle that will keep survivors from constantly healing. Bog Water. Any survivor within 16 meters of a Pentacle sign will scream when the Hag teleports to it. So if you're using your Pentacle signs to teleport between important places like generators, if there's a survivor hiding nearby, you won't have to look for them. You'll immediately know they're there if they don't have Calm Spirit. Pussy Willow Catkins. Any survivor hit shortly after triggering a Wicca sign will drop any item they are carrying on the ground. So this is sort of an add-on that's built in that replaces Franklin's Demise. It doesn't destroy the item when it falls on the ground, but it still allows the Hag to trap the item again in case they try to come back. Half Eggshells. Triggering a Wicca sign causes the following effects for its trip duration: suppresses the terror radius of the Hag, increases the fake terror radius of the Mud Phantasms to 24 meters. This is basically a stealth add-on that will allow the Hag to confuse people and get free hits, which will be much more viable now because she moves at normal movement speed. Dragonfly Wings. Survivors hit shortly after triggering a Wicca sign will be inflicted with the Mangled status effect, so I think it's just a good common add-on you can use to slow down survivor healing. Cypress Necklet increases the amount of signs the hag can place by 3, and this can be stacked with other add-ons that increase the amount of signs that she can place in case your playstyle is wanting to revolve around really controlling the entire map and you want to set up a lot of combos all around the map. I think this is the type of add-ons you'd want to go for. Bloodied Water increases Wicca Sign's trigger range by 30%. Now, Hag used to have these add-ons as well, but they actually worked against you because you wanted survivors to be as close as possible to your trap when they activated them so that you could get a free hit. However, with the new Wicca Sign, this will work in your favor because you'll still be able to hit them even if they trigger your trap from a further distance away, even if it's a little bit harder. Willow Wreath. The Hag will hear faint sounds when within 32 meters of a survivor. This is basically a built-in whispers that allows you to know if a survivor is possibly watching you when you're placing down a trap. Swamp Orchid Necklet increases the amount of signs the hag can place by 4, again going back to that playstyle. Dried Cicada. It now takes 3 additional seconds to destroy hag signs with a flashlight. So if you load into a lobby and you see the survivors are bringing a bunch of flashlights, you can use this add-on to deplete their flashlights more quickly, and that way you don't have to change your entire build and use something like Franklin's Demise to deal with it. Cracked Turtle Egg increases the Wicca Sign's trip duration by 50%. So in case you're in an inconvenient situation, like you're hooking a survivor when somebody triggers your trap, this will still give you enough time to teleport to them afterwards. On top of that, you could combine this with something like the half eggshell add-on that will increase your stealth capabilities even more and allow you to really trick survivors. Bloodied Mud. Hag's ink sign will be replaced with a sign that completely destroys any item on the ground in a 4-meter radius. So this add-on will completely get rid of her snare traps altogether, but in place of that, you'll now be able to destroy items that have fallen or been placed on the ground by survivors. You can use this with Franklin's Demise to counter Survive with Friends who are doing callouts and saying, hey, the hag has Franklin's Demise, put your items down. Now you can just destroy them if you find them. And on top of that, you can also use this with her yellow add-on that makes it to where survivors drop their items when you hit them coming out of a Wicca sign. Scarred Hand. Hag's ink sign will now be replaced with mud phantasms that have collision with survivors. Grants 300% bonus blood points and deviousness. Now this add-on already existed, but it was more of a meme add-on that made the hag weaker. However, with hag's other base changes and the fact that she has access to other traps, this can now be a pretty powerful add-on depending on how you use it and what you combine it with. And it would suck to do a hag rework and get rid of body blocker hag, who is one of the more fun versions of hag to play against. Rusty Shackles. Tripped Wicca signs do not spawn a mud phantasm. Tripped Wicca signs do not give any indication of having been tripped to survivors. So Rusty Shackles already exist, now it's just being restricted to the Wicca sign. Anybody who already plays Hag knows that this is one of her strongest add-ons, so I still think it has a place to exist unless it is possibly too strong now. I guess you'd probably have to see. Grandma's Heart. The Pentacle sign will be replaced by a sign that creates an aura up to 24-meter range which inflicts injured survivors with a broken status effect. This effect lasts for 5 seconds after leaving the aura's range. Only 4 pentacle signs could be placed at one time. So I think this is a really cool add-on that would allow Hag players to strategically set up areas on the map where survivors wouldn't be allowed to heal. Immediately things come to mind like really inconvenient like 2-story and 3-story structures where survivors can set a boon up at the top and the killer would need to waste a lot of time going up there to destroy the boon. Now she can just place a pentacle sign somewhere around the building and make it to where it's impossible to actually heal at that boon. So outside of countering boons, you can also use this on smaller maps to effectively make a large portion of the map super inconvenient and you can't heal on them and you'll have to go to certain places. I think that this would be a really strong and cool add-on. Disfigured Ear. Triggering a Wicca sign causes the survivor to be deafened for 30 seconds, a status effect a lot of survivors aren't too familiar with, but it basically makes it to where you can't hear anything, and I think it would be a pretty cool add-on, especially for 30 seconds. Typically when you see deafened status effects, it's very short to the point where it almost does nothing, so 30 seconds would make this actually a significant value. Now getting into our iridescent add-ons, we have Lock of Hair. This replaces the Wicca sign with Mud Thralls. Once activated, Mud Thralls will patrol the map and attack survivors until destroyed. Only 2 Mud Thralls can be active at one time. So these would work very similar to Nemesis's base zombies. Now, they wouldn't have access to all of Nemesis's add-ons that make his zombies stronger, but at the same time, their hit would just immediately injure a survivor instead of infecting them, so that is stronger. And then you could use this with things like mud traps, so that a hand comes out and grabs a survivor, but at the same time, they also triggered a zombie trap, so the zombie comes out and gives a free hit. And I'm sure you can think of a lot of other combinations that you could set up with mud thralls. However, you do have to keep in mind that you're replacing your Wicca sign, which is definitely Hag's strongest trap in this rework. Her last add-on is Virgin Blood, something that is in no short supply in DBD. The Pentacle sign will now be replaced with the ability to see the aura of the survivor who stepped on the sign until they lose a health state. Now, this is of course super strong. You could get all of the survivors with permanent aura reading until they're injured, so you could set a really strong endgame play up with something like Noed and Terminus and No Way Out. But outside of that, it's just generally a really good information add-on. You could place these signs in really common areas. The survivors would have no idea they've stepped on them and no idea that you can see their aura at all times. All in all though, I think these add-ons not only make up for certain weaknesses that the Hag has, they also substitute quality of life perks that work really well on her, allowing her to use a lot more different builds. And of course, they create a lot of unique playstyles for players to tinker with. Now, obviously, I'm very biased, but I believe this would make Hag significantly more interesting. I'd actually enjoy playing against her because the experience would vary so significantly every time. Clearly, I'd enjoy playing as her much more often than I do now, which is very rarely. I feel like my knowledge of maps and game sense would be heavily rewarded over what Hag is currently. Now, there's a good chance I've surely overlooked something horrible, a combination of add-ons or something that is completely game-breaking, but that's why teams create these types of things and not individuals. Regardless, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments if I failed in some major way. As far as her perks go, I've already reworked Hex Ruin and Hex the Third Seal in my perk rework video, so I'll just share those on the screen here. I think Devour Hope is great just how it is, so it definitely sucks. It will most likely be changed soon. Let me know what you guys think though. Is Hag really as boring as I believe she is? What would you rework about her? Am I dumb? What killer would you want to be reworked the most? And of course, thanks so much for watching and have a good one.